Chapter 6, Black Belt Mentality. If it was easy, everyone would have it. Halima Zubair Rijal. I grew up in a home of high achievers. Amongst the many disciplines, the family took great pride in the art of storytelling. I remember evening dinners being filled with life lessons through journeys in and out of time. A connection with and from the past that surpassed the present. I remember the emotional roller coaster of the reoccurring themes. Gratitude often served for the setups as well as the punchlines. For let's be honest for a moment. No one was guaranteed the life they hold. The vast variety of quotables mixed with mind-boggling questions leaving us speechless from the ones that had passed. As well as being highly stimulated by the questions, I would often find myself actively listening. As inquiries could be directed towards any of us siblings, I would struggle to provide an answer at times. But if there's one thing I deeply love about my upbringing, it's the genuine support that was always close at hand. It wouldn't matter if it was my immediate family or the extended one. Somehow, this universal truth surrounded me from every visible corner. You see, I learned a vital lesson at a young age, that positive encouragement will always be in high demand. Innately, I couldn't verbalize it then, but I always felt that I was sitting amongst the greats. On the days that I did decide to share a thought or observation, it would almost always be related to martial arts. My father used to wake me up in the middle of the night and have one-on-ones with me using the television as a point of departure. I recall how my entire body would glow up as we sat on the couch and watched reruns of Le Festival des Arts Martyrs from Bercy, Paris. We wouldn't say much to one another. We would nod as we observed the variety of fighting styles from the mixture of represented cultures. I loved it. The fighters spoke my language, and so did my father. It was a great topic of discussion the following day. It was a great time to be alive, through the endless scattering of pieces of wood being broken as the fighters would scream their lungs out throughout the silence of the night. I learned to adorn the nocturnal. By observing everything exercised by anyone in the art of combat, I quickly realized something about myself that my peers would only learn later on. I was destined to fight. Yes, just like you. As mentioned previously, to some degree we all have a fighter within us. Sometimes we're just stuck having to fight ourselves by ourselves and with ourselves. 2 decades after indulging in hours of Power Ranger episodes, Jet Li, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Van Damme movies, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Ninja Turtles, Ninja Gaiden, and Enter the Tekken games, I would finally receive a first Dan black belt from my Taekwondo club, Tian Dao, and went on to majoring in philosophy at the University of Lund. Ironically, I recall that first lecture held by my professor, Don Eggenson. He was always calm and collected, yet smooth and effective. He was gently charismatic with a great sense of humor. His storytelling style felt familiar. It reminded me of our family dinners. I loved how he too would extract both joy and humor when explaining a thought or two. It was as if he knew that his classes were the exception to the rest of the prestigious world of academia. He would give us thought experiments by asking inquiries like, if 2 subjects were faced with the predicament of wanting the same parking space at the same time, who would morally be more eligible to use it? We would break into smaller groups to discuss amongst each other before returning to share our thoughts across the room. Subject A had a sick relative waiting for medical prescriptions to be collected from the pharmaceutical. The amount of intensity for that desire would translate to what I'll be referring to as an urgency number. Pay close attention to this concept. It will appear a couple of times henceforth. For instance, the urgency number of the desire to want to park would be of the arbitrary number +7, whilst subject B, who on this particular day wasn't in any particular rush, obtained a lesser urgency number of +4. Upon comparing the two, we can quickly identify that subject A would have a higher urgency number, morally helping us to solve the situation at hand. But in a less pragmatic state of living, our lives aren't constructed with urgency numbers being displayed on our foreheads. Yet, we're often more aware of our own urgency number than of others. The intensity of that desire for a certain outcome in life may vary. The key is this. By being able to self-evaluate your urgency number, you will know in which direction you must focus your energy towards in order to find an inevitable breaking point within. This profound concept of being aware of one's urgency number gave birth to what I would later start to call the black belt mentality. By definition, the practitioner must accept certain truths in order to progress to the next stage of consciousness. The nature of truth is that it is just that, true in all of its instances. Upon being visited by pain on such a journey would be inevitable. Yet, in order to advance within martial arts, one must accept that all sensations will sooner or later surpass. Pain and discomfort are to be treated with the same intensity. Remember, just because you might be overwhelmed with a high level of urgency number doesn't mean that you're acting accordingly in relation to the situation at hand. Your personal experienced pain is only felt to the degree that it is known by you and only by you. The rest of us are forced to act and react in regards to how you're handling your experienced pain. Coach Gibreel Yatta would often bring forward his insights in life and so calmly tell us in order to accept a situation in any efficient way, one must be able to identify the difference between want to do and ought to do within a given situation. The breaking point lingers between the two. Often we know what it is we ought to do. It's battling our own selves with the other side of the equation that's slightly trickier. Here's a thought experiment you can try to test your default action plan. Number 1. Identify in a few sentences the cause of your pain/sensations that you keep experiencing, even when you know what you ought to do, but just can't get started. Number 2, give the entire situation an honest urgency number between -15 and +15. Example, the current situation I'm in is not having the peace of mind to study for my exams. The experienced urgency number is experienced as -5. While I was to take a shower and eat something good, the momentum might increase and now feel like a +7. Number 3, compare the arbitrary number to a previous incident where you felt more of an intensity towards a similar situation. For example, I didn't take a shower and removed all distractions, but now that I also hit my toe on the corner of the bed, the entire situation increased in intensity to an urgency number of +12. Number 4, as objectively as possible, identify how your default reaction towards hitting your toe would, within other circumstances that differ from this current one, be. The mentality is as such. By being able to identify the current intensity of your perceived sensations, you'll be able to compare the situations to other situations where you've experienced a lesser, intense urgency number, now leading to a similar incident. My experienced analogy of a black belt was to trace back how I dealt with a similar situation in previous stages of my journey. A white belt may have the mentality needed to apply in a situation in order for the experienced pain to subside. But a black belt has a longer track record of experience how not all pain lasts forever. This is amongst one of the great hidden secrets of martial arts practitioners. Every stage of your belt is represented by a definite visible hue. Your default urgency number is where you should self-assess in order to take departure from in any given situation. The key here is to identify which so-called belt you're currently wearing within a given situation. The question to ask is, how quickly can you consciously move towards an equilibrium? It might be worth being considerate to letting subject A take the parking space as they look to be experiencing a higher level of worry and stress. After all, subject B's errands had a less apparent urgency number. I guess we sometimes do have our urgency numbers written on our foreheads. Stress. Stress is an indicator that the person hasn't found peace in knowing where they are heading towards, and also without an accurate self-assessment of their urgency number in mind. Note to self: the things you love and desire don't often start at zero, especially uncomfortable situations. Find mentors. And by mentors, I mean anyone that has gone through a similar situation and is willing to share their insights with you. They are the black belts in a given situation. They would know how as well as when to act accordingly to what, with a specific inevitable breaking point in mind. Imagine being stuck in an avalanche. You and your companion are suddenly faced with a situation, instantly raising your urgency number to plus 40. As this was your first time in such a situation, you didn't have an action plan close at hand. Only piles of snow to be found in every direction in which you turn. Naturally, for some, the sensation of panic kicks in and you're left with no choice than to want to dig yourself out. No matter the direction, you were raised with the mentality that any plan is better than no plan. So you go ahead and you start digging. Your companion, on the other hand, had been told what to do in case they were faced with a scenario like this. He managed to dig a small hole around his mouth. Once there was a big enough hole, he collected enough saliva. He collected all that he could and let the spit drip down as the laws of gravity acted accordingly. You see, he instantly followed protocol and knew in which direction he ought to dig, whilst you found yourself trapped by panic and an overwhelmed sensation justifying your action plan in accordance to what you wanted to do. Your companion realized that his desires were simply desires, though his action plan resulted in him digging himself closer to freedom as you were left to die in the cold, as the rescue team later found you digging yourself further and further away from the surface. When you're able to assess accordingly where you are in a current situation, you can help align yourself in the direction towards your inevitable breaking point. If it's also aligned with your absolute truth, well, at least enough to identify and act upon a conscious decision that will match an expected scenario, you can consciously plan your future intentions to work as a subconscious action plan. The inevitable breaking point of any given situation would be fairly similar and not so adaptive. If your action plan stays semi-adaptive, you'll be able to see the results of an action plan earlier. It goes without saying that you'll have to sort out the time frame for each new scenario. If the scenarios keep repeating with the same results, that means your reaction to that scenario will keep on repeating as well. What you always do right before what gets the blame for what you always did afterwards might be contributing to an unwanted result. For instance, you keep working out, but you also keep celebrating every workout with an indulgence of gluttony. Your absolute truth was active in the first part and less present in the second. By prompting your environment, you'll have an approximation of when the thought of overeating kicks in. Now you're in a position to make a conscious decision. Either way, the results will be off if you act accordingly. By identifying yourself as a healthy person, you'd eventually start having a healthy alternative ready in your surroundings at your disposal. Remember, when in doubt, your vision might be of a black belt, but your present reality is where you can affect the trajectory of a result in real time.
Was I good in school or was I struggling a lot?
You were struggling.
Because in my mind, I struggled incredibly much.
Yeah, you struggled a lot.
A lot?
A lot.